Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cupid's Coach podcast. I'm Julie Ferman, your host. And today is a super fun one because you know what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about conversation. Conversation, something that's kind of an important element in dating and relationship, wouldn't you say? So I've invited a really wonderful woman to speak today with us, and her name is Sara Holtz. She's a workshop leader, she's an author, a mentor, and a podcast host. Her podcast is called Advice to My Younger Me. And I met her through an organization I've been talking about a lot lately called the Modern Elder Academy. And she and I are both big fans of that organization. We've done retreats there, and she's part of the alumni community. So am I. That's how I met her. Welcome to the program, Sara Holtz.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Julie.
It's so exciting. You found me because I guess Modern Elder Academy, we have like a singles organization, sort of a collection of single people that are attached to Modern Elder Academy. And that's how we first connected, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And knowing her as I do, she's extraordinarily growth oriented, which is why I'm interested in her and instantly fell in love with her. And now that I know she's an expert in talking to us about communication and conversation, I thought, okay, stop everything. We're having you on the podcast and I'm going to put you in the hot seat. So here you are. How does it feel being in the hot seat?
So far, so good. We'll see where the questions go.
That's one of the things I just love about this podcast is just, it's like we're in each other's living room. And since you've done so many podcast episodes as the host, it might feel a little different being the
Absolutely. I thought about that this morning. It's like turnabout is fair play.
what's more nerve-wracking, being the host or being in the hot seat as the guest?
Oh, being the host is second nature to me. So definitely being in the hot seat.
Good. Well, you're in my boot camp right now. Is that okay to tell everybody? So
Sure.
I just did. And one of the things we've been working on is conversation, questions, having courage to do things a little differently and stretch outside your comfort zone, which is what you're doing right now. Because
Great.
normally you're normally the one asking the questions.
Right.
It's really, really fun. All right. So what we're really focused on today is the power of asking the right questions in building a relationship.
Yes.
What do you mean by the right questions?
Well, I call them connection building questions. And of course they apply to dating, but they also apply to in just everyday interaction with people who you want to build a relationship with or continue a good relationship with. And what I mean by the power of connection building questions is, first of all, most of us are not very good at asking questions. I call them most conversations, and I pay a lot of attention. I go to coffee shops and I eavesdrop on other people's conversations. And most conversations are what I call ping pong conversations. So they're conversations where you say like, and I'm just going to make this up, but you know, one person says, "Oh, I just got back from London. I went with my son," and the other person says, "Oh, I took my kids to London last summer," and person number one says, "We took this great food tour in East London," and then the next person says, "I'm amazed at how much variety there is in English food these days," and then finally, one of them says, you're so right about that. I had a matcha latte there. Can you imagine that? Okay. So that what the reason I call it a ping pong conversation is each person is kind of telling their own story or in their their response is not outside the realm of what the conversation is about, but it's not exploring anything about the other person. It's just like this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. So let me turn this around into what I would call a connection building conversation. And you'll notice it has question marks at the end of at the end of some of the statements. So we're going to replay it. Same conversation, same coffee shop. Person number one, I just came back from London. I went there with my son. Second person, how did you decide to go to London? First person, my son's thinking about going to grad school there. and we wanted to check it out. Um, like what it would be like to live there. Other person, I remember when we did all those college tours. So, what was your son's big takeaway from it all? Person number one, he really liked it. Back to our person number two. How would you feel about his being so far away from home? I mean, just see what the difference of this is, right? The energy, where the focus is. So the focus is on the other person, not on you. You're spending time listening to their response instead of sitting there thinking, what am I going to say next? You're thinking about what is my question going to be for what they just told me, not what do I have in my repertoire to share. Um, so that's the first thing about we really are not very good at asking questions. And in fact, there's been a lot of research done about the difference between question asking by children and by adults. So it turns out that the average 4-year-old, if anybody has been in the sphere of a 4-year-old, asks about 400 questions a day. The average adult asks about 20. So huge diminution in the number of questions that we ask as we get older. And my guess is that most questions that adults ask are what I call transactional questions. In other words, they're like, um, how do I get from point A to point B? Or can we move the meeting from Wednesday to Thursday? Things like that. They're not really designed to build connections between people. They're just designed to get information. Okay, so that's a little bit of background about how poor we are at asking questions. And um, do you have any questions on that?
I think it's I think it's brilliant, and it occurs to me to ask about something that Alison Armstrong has shared with me. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her.
Sure.
She's just amazing. And I did a course with her where we were talking about a lot of the subtle and not so subtle distinctions between men and women. And this conversation came up where women are consistently complaining, not happy about the fact that the guys are not asking questions. They don't seem to be interested in who she is and what she's all about. And Allison stopped me and she said that men are more inclined instinctively to conceal, not to just put everything out on the table.
Oh, interesting.
And women, because we are what she calls the Velcro of the universe, we're more inclined to want to ask questions and kind of dig in. And it almost to men feels like they would be prying or would be discourteous or disrespectful to be digging in on these kinds of things. Have you thought about that? And did you know anything about this distinction between men and women regarding conceal and reveal?
No, but it's a really interesting point. I'll have to add gender to one of my questions about, who are, what makes for a good question, who are good question askers, those kinds of things. Um, there is some research that's been done about who do, of the genders who ask more questions. It turns out it's not quite as black and white as what your example suggested. Because in fact, like in academic settings, where let's say, in fact, that's where the research was done. It was at conferences, academic conferences. The men asked many more questions than the women, right? So the women were intimidated. Um, Perhaps the men felt more comfortable in that environment than, let's say, a dating situation. But by many factors, men ask more questions than women do in those kinds of settings. On the other hand, at the family dinner table, for example, women ask more questions. So in those situations which relate to relationships and whatever, women are more likely to ask questions. So it's not a black and white situation. It's very contextual.
Yes, it makes all the sense in the world because men are more comfortable in the domain of intellect, academia. It's been encouraged all along that they develop their strength in this area. And instinctively, they'll pull back as opposed to diving in on super personal questions. But women, since we're the Velcro of the universe, we want to know every little thing. I love what you said, Sarah, about so many of the ping pong kinds of conversations being transactional. And perhaps you were on the Zoom call we had this week with our boot camp students about what it's like for a man when a woman is asking questions. We didn't use the term transactional, but let's just say, for example, you're the guy and I'm the girl, and we're on a date, and I'm asking you questions like, so which part of town do you live in? Or, and where did you go to college? And uh, I wouldn't ask right out, like, what's the value of your home? But when a woman asks,
No, I wouldn't.
but when a woman asks a man, where exactly do you live? In Los Angeles, she might say, are you north or south of Ventura Boulevard, for example? I mean, just all these things where they're trying to say, okay, where does she live? Are you on the other side of the Oakland Bay Bridge? Which side of the bridge are you on? And it's because we're trying to figure out where this person is in terms of status and um, income and wealth and desirability. And we asked the guys, how does it feel when you feel like a woman is asking you a leading question and she's trying to find out, about your financial status or how much money you have or how much schooling you have? And they all barked, it feels awful. And so it feels to them like it feels to us as women when a guy's like trying to find out, how quickly could we have sex? Or he's looking down our blouse, and it's like, ew. So is that what you would call a transactional conversation?
So, um, I want to say something, and I don't know how you want to structure this, but I actually have 7 tips for asking connection building questions. But this is a perfect example of the first thing, and I think the most important thing in terms of when you want to ask a connection building question. In other words, a question which is designed to build a relationship with you. And it could easily be with your boss. It could be with another woman. It could be, whatever. Like it doesn't have to be in this dating romantic situation. But the first important thing is to be clear about what your intention is for the questions that you're going to ask. And so, for example, when you're asking, like, where do you live? And your intention is to figure out how much this person is worth. That is not a question which is designed, is the intention of which is to build a relationship. I might actually ask that exact same question. And Julie, I'm going to do it. Can we practice one?
Oh, go for it.
So I heard you recently moved. So where are you living now?
We're living in Erie, Colorado, north of Denver.
And how did you decide to go there? I know you loved Santa Fe.
Oh, love Santa Fe so much, and I never, ever, ever thought I was going to leave. But I'm in a partnership. I've been married to Gil Ferman for 35 years, and we are in a different stage of life. He's retired. I'm anything but retired. I love the work that I do. I love obsessing over Sarah's love life, everybody's love life. Husband needs more companionship, which has to do with love languages. One of his love languages is quality time together. Well, I'm still doing a lot of stuff, and he would like to have more of my hangout time, right? And so he said, both of our boys live up in Colorado. We
Ah,
one of them up there during COVID. Kevin moved up here, and then recently our son Alex, who had been in Santa Fe, moved up to Colorado too. And Gil said, "Come on, we got it. We got to get the family together." We'd been sort of splintered since COVID and all the things that happened in our family and everybody's families during COVID. So that was the reason. And I was so reluctant, Sarah. I was like, no, I loved our house. I loved our membership at Las Campanas, which we're still members. I mean, built a wonderful community there. But it doesn't matter where my desk is. And when I realized that, and I've always loved Colorado, spent my summers in Colorado as a camper and a camp counselor later. And I thought, what the heck? That would give us an opportunity to build Colorado and find all kinds of incredible single people who would love to meet other single people in Colorado. So it was not anything I expected to do. It was definitely outside of my comfort zone, but because of family and the partnership that I have with my husband, it was an easy choice.
And so how are you feeling about being there?
Loving it. Love
Okay. So notice the difference of the intention that I had there. There I was trying to figure out like, oh, I heard Julie moved. I wonder what the backstory is and how that's all going, right? That was my intention, was to to strengthen our relationship. You can imagine that if I was using these questions to figure out what your net worth was, after I asked the question, where do you live? I might have had follow-up questions which were like, oh, did you buy it recently? Right? Which would mean it costs more, all of these kinds of things, right? So this issue about what our intention is behind the questions we're asking is really critical. So I didn't jump in our conversation in the boot camp, but I could have jumped in and said, have you ever thought from the questioner's point of view that it's not clear what your intention is, and in fact, your intention may be mixed. It may actually be that you're asking that question to figure out like, do I need to worry about walking to my car after I have a drink at his house? That you need to be clear about what you're trying to do. And sometimes, we get waylaid. We wind up on a pivot in our questioning. And so it can be very difficult to keep this intention, which is I'm trying to build a relationship with this person. So, like a good example of that would be if I had asked, oh my God, what's it like to live in all that cold, right? About it. That would have kind of completely moved us away from building a relationship. It's a kind of criticism, right, of you. And so if I keep in mind that what I'm trying to do is build a relationship with you, whether that's on a date or, sitting on an airplane next to somebody, it drives our questions. They're different questions. And my guess is even for those guys in that session, they would feel differently about being asked those questions. Their guard might go off on the first question, but
it.
when the second question was, what's your favorite thing about it? That would have completely changed their sense about I'm being interrogated, I'm being evaluated, whatever.
I like the direction that we're headed in, Sarah, because I'm always encouraging people to know very clearly what their primary dating purpose
Mhm.
is. So if I'm a single person and I know I'm looking for I'm hoping to find, I'm trying to set up my life so that I will have intersections with the type of people who share my primary dating purpose. I'm probably going to ask a question along the lines of, why the heck are you dating? Are you just having fun? Are you hoping for the last first date of your life? You give it wide possibilities of what his primary dating purpose might be. And I love when people ask those kinds of questions, because if somebody's not really ready for the relationship, you're going to find that out early. And then you might realize, okay, I'm not really going to consider this person as a potential partner right now. This person's not ready. So let me shift the nature of the questions to who are you? What turns you on? What makes you tick? Because I know that you're not going to be ready for the type of relationship that I think I'm ready for. Are we going to throw it in the trash and leave and say, sorry, you're the wrong person for me, I'm out of here? No, we're going to transform the nature of the relationship so that the time we're spending together is worthwhile no matter what happens.
Mhm. Excellent.
So, Sarah, tell me more about these 7 categories of questions.
Yes. So let's begin. The first one is just what we talked about, is that the intention of the question is to learn something of consequence about the other person. So that's one of the reasons why, like, oh, how are things going is not such a great question, because and what's the typical response? Fine,
Fine.
I'm having a good day, whatever it is. I haven't learned anything about this person. So that's, you want the intention to build that you are learning something of consequence about that person. So, Julie, I learned in our brief example, I learned a lot of things of consequence about you. I learned you have two sons, obviously adults. I learned that you loved living in Santa Fe. I learned that you've recently relocated to someplace, lots of issues relating to that, right, that we could explore. I learned that you went to summer camp in Colorado. I mean, I could take that and say, oh, I went to summer camp in Southern California. I bet you that was really a different experience. So what's it like going to summer camp in Colorado, right? So I'm learning something of consequence, which allows me to continue the conversation. When you say, how's your day going? And people say, fine, where's that going, right? Okay, so that's the first one, is you have to be um, really intentional about it. And I also want to say, there's a lot of stuff out there about like, oh, on first dates, you're supposed to ask these cute questions like, if you were a planet, what planet would you be, right? Well, I mean, maybe you would, on the rare occasion, you would be talking to an astrophysicist and said, oh, well, I would be interested in being Saturn. And let me tell you why. The gravitational pulls there are completely different than we're here, right? And then that might lead to some, like, how did you become an astrophysicist? All of those kinds of things, right? But for most people, the answer is Pluto. End of conversation. Nothing of value that I've learned about somebody there, right? Even if I said to you, well, how did you pick Pluto? You're like, it reminds me of the dog in the cartoon, right? So like nothing there is leading to really learning something of value that is going to allow you to know the person better and to continue the conversation. Okay, so number one, most important thing, be very clear about the intention of your asking these questions, right? The second one is, and this one is, I'm always sort of sad about this question, but the intention of your question is genuine curiosity. And the reason why I say it makes me sad sometimes is because I think there's a lot of people out there who aren't curious. And, I mean, that's very alien to me, but, and I think, it has not good ramifications for our society that people aren't curious. But you make sure that this is not just a script that's, I've given you, or any of the millions of little conversation card games that you can get are, but that this is actually something you're interested in. Because first of all, Julie, you'll be the first person to say it. It's going to show up on my face, right? Like what I hear, how I respond to it, whatever. And also it's going to be authentic, right? Which is one of the keystones, I think, of good relationships, right? Is that they're authentic. Okay, so that's the second one. And the third one is that the question is appropriate for the relationship. Okay, and which is to say that when you first meet somebody, you don't ask them, how much money did you make, or what kind of work did you, how did you pick between being an investment banker or in venture capital? Was it because it made more money? Right? Those are not appropriate for the relationship that you have with somebody that you're just meeting. So, I could give you any examples like, I might say to you, where did you grow up? Or I might say to you, how did where you grow up shape you? Now, where you grow up is actually a pretty good introductory question, goes lots of different places, it gives the person, it's a very safe question. If you ask the question, how did where you grow up shape you? That's a much deeper question. You don't know where the answer is going to go. It may be that that's actually very traumatic for them. That's where the foster care agency sent me, right? So that could wind up being actually a very deep question. So you want to make sure that the questions you're asking are appropriate to where your relationship is with that other person. Okay. The fourth one is that questions should be open-ended. And think of how often we ask questions that really aren't open-ended. Oh, you live in outside of Denver, north or south?
North.
Right. So, I mean, that even we tend to think of open and closed-ended questions as yes or no, but that's a perfect example of a closed-ended question that is not yes or no. So there's lots of uh, open or closed-ended questions, or let's say closed-ended questions that are not about yes or no, but they're very, very finite in terms of the answer you're going to get. Like they
Yeah,
don't
like
leave.
it might be like, well, how did you know where to pick in the
Right.
area?
Excellent. I mean, that would be, a great follow-up question for that. But you want to make sure that you don't just stop at north, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, I think it's really helpful for us to challenge listeners today in thinking about what is the purpose for the questions that you want to ask, and maybe make a list, you know? I ask everybody to really focus in on what their primary dating purpose is, but what is beneath the questions that you really want to know? So often with women, the key criteria when we really boil it down has something to do with trustworthiness, honesty, integrity, loyalty, uh, all of that. And so, what would be a good question that might be asked on a first date or a second date related to finding out about that? What would be like a good question that you can ask and in a first date about what qualities really matter to you? What are you hoping for? What are you looking for? What type of people really appeal to you? What are you thinking about first date questions and the purpose of it?
Well, so, I might say, I'm always interested in people and their relationships. And so tell me about your favorite quality about your best friend.
Ooh. All right, let me think about that. What comes to mind is this girl, Betsy, that I get to spend time with today because she's here in Colorado and she was my next door. Lived in the dorm room right next to me in freshman year at the University of Vermont. And she was like my center. It's like I was grounded when I could be with Betsy. I could be myself when I was with Betsy. She introduced me to yoga and meditation and all this stuff that I'd never really known about coming from a Black Angus cattle breeder family, in St. Louis. So it was really, really beautiful for me to recognize that that's a quality that matters to me in the people that I want to be around, somebody I can be my whole self with.
Okay. So did we get some good information about Julie and what, those intangibles that are really important to us, right? You can't come out and say to somebody, "Are you kind?" or
Right.
whatever, right? But this was, I mean, how did you feel when I asked you that question? Did you feel like that was intrusive? Did you feel like, oh, this is fun? I get to talk about my best friend. I can frame myself in my best possible light here, whatever.
I was
Remember, we're in the first date
I,
conversation.
I was intrigued with the question and it was a fun one for me to think about and it was fun to share and it helped me clarify what is it about Betsy that makes
It's okay.
she was special in 1978 and she's special today all these years later for the same reason because she helped me learn how important it is to be with people I can be my full self with, my goofy self, my funny self, my smart self, my spiritual self. And she was probably the first person that I felt could really see me in all those different lights. So I learned from that, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, and that's, great questions do exactly that, which is they cause us to have aha moments about ourselves, right? Which is like, one of your takeaways might have been, wow, I've really come a long way since that high school, since that college dorm, thanks to Betsy, right? You know,
And isn't it interesting how these times in our life can be so pivotal?
mhm.
Like somebody you met when you were 16, somebody you met when you were 28 changed everything about what, right? So I really like it. And I'm trying to help people in my world expand the purpose of dating, right? Because most of the people that you're going to meet today, tomorrow, this week, this month, this year, they're not going to be your person. They're not. They have a person already, they're partnered up, or it's the wrong demographic, or they like guys instead of girls. There's always some reason why they can't be your person. Is it a waste of time? I say no. Not at all. Not if we bring our curiosity and we can learn something about humanity from talking to Sara. Can I learn something about her as a unique, particular person? Maybe you and I are on a date and it's not the fit for romance. One of us wants babies, one of us doesn't. One of us has the hots for the other person physically, the other person's like, not really, which is a big barrier. Do we throw it in the trash? No. We look for other areas where we can have intersections and we can contribute to each other. And if you and I are on a date and we realize we're not the right fit for each other, who do you know? Who do you know might be a good fit for
Exactly.
me, right? I'm open to love, romance, and dating. I can tell you're not quite ready for all that right now. You're just recently out of a divorce. Maybe you know somebody that I should go on a date with. What do you think?
Great. So I still have a couple more, two more tips. Your questions should increase in vulnerability. So we start with that, like, where did you grow up? And we move to, how did where you grow up affect who you are today? Those are very different vulnerability questions. So if I said to you, I'm taking it, where'd you grow? You grew up in St. Louis. If the first thing I said to you was, so what about St. Louis made you the person you are today? This is our very first, you've just said, I grew up in St. Louis. Aren't you going to be a little bit like, I don't know you. Why would I share that with you?
Well, you and I are such inquisitive people and so curious. So if you and I ended up on a coffee date, we'd probably be there 4 hours later asking.
Right. Well, let me say that's every coffee date I have.
Lady,
I'm known for being the person that, the waiter's clearing off the tables at the end of the evening.
well, it makes sense because of all the people I know, you're at the very top of the pile, the heap, in terms of your passion for learning and growing. What did you just do in Oxford? What the heck were you doing there for months and months? What did you do
6
there?
months. Well, I was studying the power of questions to build relationships. So, I mean, I've always been interested in questions. Questions have been core to my career. I was a lawyer, then I was a workshop leader, then I was a podcast host. So I've always been into questions. But I was interested in, like, is there a science about this? Can we actually use questions to build relationships? And it turns out, just to the extent that we have people listening who are like, I'm not so sure about this. There actually are studies which have been done. Interestingly, a lot of them in the context of online dating or speed dating, which have to do with, are these relationship building opportunities? And it turns out the answer is yes. And so one of the studies was done. They divided the group into twos. Uh, some people were told that they should ask 15 minutes, they should ask 15 questions in the next 5 minutes. And the other group was told that they should ask only 5 questions in that 5 minutes. Okay. I don't know exactly how they all kept track of this, but that was it. And then at the end, they asked, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like the person you were talking to? Turned out that the person who asked 15 questions was rated much more highly in terms of likability than the person who only asked 5. So, I mean, again, who would have thought that serious researchers at Harvard were using online dating? And there are lots of other studies which have shown, like, the probability of, not lots of, but there's a study which shows that the probability of being asked on a second date is dependent on how many questions you asked. So people who ask more questions are more likely to get a second date than people who ask fewer questions. So big tip here, everybody.
Sarah, Have you ever been in a situation where somebody's asking a lot of questions because they think they're supposed to, but they're not really listening? And
Yes. Well,
talk
so
to
let me say, you're getting each
me
of
who
my
does.
tips out of order, but
Oh, yeah, right, right. Go ahead and finish with your tips, and at
no,
the
I was going to say, you know, critical to all of that. You can ask the perfect question, but if you're not listening to the answer, if instead you're thinking about what am I going to say in response to this, or worse, what are we going to cook for dinner? Or what, oh, that person just reminded me of something I should put on my to-do list, which means you're not really listening, right? That the best possible question, which is received by somebody who's not really listening to the answer, is not building a relationship. And we know that, right? We watch people's kind of intention, their attention to us. If they're not really listening, there's something that like goes across their face, right? Because obviously they're in their head about something else. So that the notion of being, I think in the corporate world we talk about being active listeners, going like, whatever it is really core to being able to use questions as a way to build relationships. If the only thing you're doing is asking good questions, but you're not really listening to the answers, not getting you anything.
So what would you say about listening and how we can, on purpose, become better listeners?
I think it's a practice skill, to be perfectly honest. In fact, I would say that I have worked for years at honing the skill, which is when I find it's like meditation. When you find yourself kind of drifting off, you have to bring yourself back. Um, and when you're like, oh, I wonder why they planted that palm tree right there, that's not a good thing. You want to bring it back to what this person is saying. And again, I think this whole concept of that the question comes from genuine curiosity as opposed to a list that I give you of good relationship building questions. You're more inclined to actually be attentive to what you're hearing, right? Like if I'm really interested, Julie, in why you moved to Colorado, because why would somebody leave Santa Fe? I was really interested. So I wasn't sitting there thinking like, oh, what's my next question? I'm being recorded here. I can't possibly have create this, dead space. I need to ask a good question. I was actually really interested in that. So it was not hard for me to pay attention. But a lot of times, we're asking questions that are sort of rote or we want to fill the space or whatever. Then it becomes really hard to listen to the answer.
So this will be fun. I think that it would be a great idea for everyone listening to first off get very clear about what their key criteria are. So, and then to develop some questions that might be great for eliciting that information. So, one of the things that I know is really important to women is kindness.
Mhm.
They would rather be single forever than partner with somebody who isn't kind, thoughtful, considerate. So I'm putting you on the spot now, Sarah
You
Holtz.
are.
We had to come up with a question or several questions related to how can I find out if this person is kind and thoughtful and considerate?
Okay, so I want to say before, and I'm not buying time here, although I will be buying time because I don't have a great one ready right now. But remember, that's a very vulnerable question, right? That's something quite deep. So it's probably not the question you're going to ask on that first date, and it may not be the question you ask on the second date. It has to be appropriate to where the relationship is. And I think, when we go back to those men who didn't like being interrogated, that question on a first date, whatever that question was, which is like, oh, do you have older parents? Are your parents still alive? uh yeah, actually my mother. Oh, where does she live near you? And then you get into this thing about how often do you visit her, and what's her favorite kind of chocolate? Where do you get that? Do you bring that to her every time you visit? I mean, all of those things would go to kindness, right? Really bad first date questions,
You know,
right?
better, I think it's better if you notice kindness in action. So
Okay.
A
like
coffee.
how you treat the waiter, or whether you admired somebody's dog and said, "Can I pet it?" Things like that.
Yeah, like I'm noticing what happened at the bank not too long ago. And it was a long line, and there was somebody who was really struggling. It was an older man who was really struggling with getting the key in, something related to his safe deposit box or whatever. And all the people were just standing in line, except this man who was two in front of me just jumped out of line. He didn't ask anybody, save my spot. He just jumped in to help this man with something that he was struggling with. It was an act of kindness, and I noticed, and I think everybody else in line noticed. If there's something like that that happens at Marmalade Cafe in Malibu, and you're on a date and you see that somebody, like, picked up the lady's sweater that had fallen off of her chair, or said something nice to the waiter came and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to bring the sugar for your coffee." And instead of snapping at the person, your date made a joke about it, or you could make it, you see, I love the way you were kind to the server. You could have been, I know people who would have been unkind, and look what you did.
Yeah, and again, on this issue about appropriate to the relationship, maybe it's that in those early days of relationships, it's not so much questions, it's observations, right? And that maybe we hold off on how am I going to ask a question to explore kindness until I know this person a little better, and they're going to be more receptive to that question.
Kindness is something we're going to observe.
Right.
We're going to be watching for it. And then one of the other, almost always in the top five, is something related to the fun factor. What are they passionate about?
Mhm.
What do you like to do on a Sunday morning? What does your week look like? So if you and I are on a date and you want to find out if we have any shared passions, how would you go about asking me?
Uh, what's something you're looking forward to this week?
Oh, this week. Well, I finally can hike now because I had broken my foot and I had a boot on, which was really not my favorite thing, but it caused me to nest. And that was good and chill. But now I'm excited to learn all of the 3, 4, 5 mile hikes within about a 20-mile radius of where I live.
So, what have you discovered so far? Because I'm always looking for a great place to go hiking.
There's one, I think it might be called Chautauqua, but I may be thinking about the street in Santa Monica, but I'm not sure. It's in Boulder, and it's the place where a lot of people go, and it's really pretty. So if I didn't get the name right, I know I could find it in a heartbeat. So there's some really good hiking in the Boulder area.
And like, so, is it like a kind of hike? Is it technical, or could I go there with my 3-year-old grandson and he'd be on his trike, or someplace in between?
There are a bunch of really great hikes and walks in the Colorado area that are paved. So, and I know this from when I had my broken foot, and my
Hmm?
family would take me with a wheelchair because I could at least go. And they would, fight over who had to push mom up the hill. It was really hilarious. And they would joke with me about, let's just let her go when it was the so, there are great things like that for if you want to bike or if you have somebody who isn't particularly mobile. But then all of the trails, they'll tell you if it's 600 feet elevation gain or 1,500 feet elevation gain. I'm putting a hike together for a couple of people I know in Los Angeles, and he's the guy who has no problem doing 1,500 feet elevation in an hour. He's just, he's trained himself. But I have to find out if she's that type of a hiker. Maybe it would be better to do a casual little 3 mile hike without a lot of elevation. These are the things that we like to find out.
So, I get to LA often, and I'm of the 200-foot elevation club. Uh,
Ah,
so, what's your favorite hike in LA that's like that?
well, I love just being on the Strand. I have people meet up and in front of Santa Monica Pier, where the roller coaster is, and go north or go south. It's flat. And if people want to get some exercise, I'll send them to where the stairs are in Santa Monica and give them the challenge of, okay, how many times do you want to go up and down these
Oh my
stairs?
gosh.
And if you can do 7 or 8, well, we know you're in pretty good shape. Maybe you only do 1, and then you sit on the park bench and have a picnic, right? So I love it if people know all of their favorite hikes and walks, not to mention all of their favorite galleries. And if you know when there's like a Friday night gallery walk in your area, gather all of those things so that if you're on a date with somebody and you discover that they love art or that they love challenging themselves um, physically, maybe there's a 10K run that they're getting prepared for. Yeah, you want to go to the Santa Monica stairs and do a little workout before we have lunch. Those kinds of things, activity dates, I love to see in the first 3 dates.
Okay, so for our listeners and watchers, look at how much we've learned about Julie in this conversation, and a little bit about me, right? I mean, in terms of like the question, my 200 feet elevation game, you're getting the idea that I'm not going to be the person who's going to do a triathlete with you, triathlon with you. So this is a great example of a good question leads to a lot of information, which is, going to build a relationship, but also to Julie's point, is helping you kind of understand, like, who is this person? Are we a match? Is this, do I like the energy that she brings when she answered that question? I mean, I hope people noticed Julie started lighting up. I know this is now something that's important to her, right? So, I just, because you're seeing this in real life, right? Of course, we see it all the time on, whatever television station we watch when they're doing interviews. But this, those are pretty uh, buttoned down. People have their objectives, which are not usually to build relationships with the people they're interviewing, things like that. But I mean, I think this is, wonderful to actually see how this works in real life.
You know what you said about lighting up when someone lights up in conversation? That could probably be a really good goal for every first date. What's my goal? If I'm having a date with Sarah, I want to see what turns her on. I want to see what brings her joy. I want to see what makes her laugh. Um, those kinds of bringing that level of curiosity instead of, is she my person, is going to make for a much better date.
Right. And this again goes back to this issue about intention, right? Like, we don't pay enough, I think, attention to what our intention is when we are interacting with people.
Yes. So here's a fun question. Sometimes we're in a business meeting or we're on a date with somebody who,
Those are very different situations, hopefully.
I guess we'll just focus on the interpersonal stuff, but you're on a date and it's not going anywhere. It's just flat. There's like nothing really happening. What's your suggestion when you notice that? It could be you're not bringing it, they're not bringing it, but it's just sort of like, you got to get through the date. It's not going to be your person. What's your recommendation?
Wow, I guess I would say, what's your recommendation? You're the expert on that. Um, I think first of all, there was actually a really important point in what you said, which is you actually need to really pay attention to how people are responding to your questions. Because again, I go back to your comment about the men who felt like they were being interrogated. That's the word I would have used to describe how they just were feeling, which is that if people are feeling interrogated, you need to completely change the energy. In other words, you need to change from I'm asking every question to, so like, what's something that you've always been curious about? That completely changes the energy from all these questions I'm asking about where you live and how much your house was worth, whatever. So I guess while I don't have the question, what I would say is it's really important to watch the energy in the conversation, and when you see that really flagging, to recognize I need to change what's going on here. Like, I need to stop asking the kind of questions I'm asking. Julie, I think one of your suggestions is about saying, well, I've been asking you a lot of questions. Do you have any questions for me? Right.
You want to know? That's a closed question. If you say it instead, what do you want to know about me? Pick a topic.
Yeah, but good
You,
for catching me.
yeah, because it's an ongoing thing. But how do you, given that you're the expert on questions and conversation connection building, what do you think of that question? So I've been learning so much about you, Sarah. It's fascinating. What do you want to know about me? Pick a topic.
It's interesting because when you said it, I thought that it's a mixed bag. And I think it depends on whether the other person wants to play, right? And maybe that lagging of energy is because they're checked out. They're not interested in you, right? So again, it's a thing about watching the energy, I think. Um, so I mean, obviously, if you're having a 3-course meal and you're at the end of the appetizers, you can't very well say, I get the sense that we're really not a match for each other. I've really enjoyed this time with you. And, thanks very much. This was a restaurant I'd never been to and I've always wanted to. This has been great.
And
So
then you bolt before the main course even come. That would be, no, can't do
yeah, you'll have to tell me how to deal with that.
that.
But,
Yeah.
I think, first of all, one thing I would say that about this issue is we tend to be very uncomfortable with silence. And silence it doesn't necessarily mean somebody's checked out. That may be the way that they process things. That may be that you actually asked a really good question and this person is really trying to figure it out, right? So I guess my first reaction would be, obviously, if this goes on for a long time and there, even in silence, there can be energy, right? You can see this person is thinking about this. I don't need to interrupt them. They aren't planning their grocery list. There's something about the way, again, this is all this body language, all this information we get from people, and we're not even aware we're getting it. That just kind of learn to be a little bit more comfortable with the silence.
Beautiful. I love that. Um, Something else I learned from Allison is some of us who are chatty and talkative, we're maybe more uncomfortable with silence.
Mhm. Definitely.
And I love women to pay attention to the guys that I call still waters run deep, not just the loud, bold, charismatic, that because a lot of those guys are masking something, and sometimes it's insecurity, and sometimes it's me, selfish,
Narcissism.
right. And some of the quieter men are overlooked, and that I find to be a big mistake. And so I've been disciplining myself, not only in my interviews with people, but also with each of my boys, with my husband, especially if there's any emotions getting triggered, to just go back to what we've learned from meditation and just zip it and notice that I'm paying attention to my breath as I'm listening, waiting for what he's going to say. Allison calls it waiting for the well. And if we jump in because we're uncomfortable with silence, we miss it.
And the other thing is, I mean, it's not going to last forever, right? Which is, of course, our fear is that we're going to spend the rest of the evening, um, just staring into the void, or everybody's going to pick up their phones. I mean, eventually, people are uncomfortable with silence. So if you are quiet, they may very well step up to, fill in the void. And at the worst, you'll say, okay, it's waited long enough. I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to try again. I'm going to use a new tact.
So,
So
what do you do when someone asks you a question that you don't want to deal with right now?
I,
Like, let's just say the worst question you could ask on a first date. So, Sarah, why'd you get divorced?
well, first of all, I would say that's an inappropriate question. That falls under this is not appropriate to the relationship, right? So that question should never have been asked. You should recognize that is not a first date question. I mean, it might well be what is the relationship question, but it is definitely not a first date question unless you're kind of, there's some banter around it and it's friendly and it's funny and, you can turn the question around that way. Like, oh, I'm wondering if that's one of the things that contributed to you guys breaking up or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
if he says, I hate roller coasters or, whatever. Um, but so I think that really falls under that's not appropriate for this relationship.
We
We
don't want to
don't,
admonish. We don't want to admonish the person on the first date. What we want to do is spin it, right? We don't want to say, well, that's an inappropriate question. You shouldn't ask that on a first date. And the guy's like, ah, instead, how could we make it more
well,
fun?
I mean, I guess you can say, I guess we're going to have to get to know each other better before I can answer that question. Something along those lines,
Yeah,
right?
or it could be
Like,
like something funny. Um, well, I don't even know if I could think of a funny way to answer that question, but um,
it might have something to do with the fact that I liked salted caramel ice cream and he liked chocolate ice cream.
there you go. It was all about the ice cream. He liked salted caramel and I like chocolate, and that was
Yeah,
we couldn't get over. And you just laugh about it,
right.
and then say. But I also want people to have a very short response that they can chime in with. You know what? We got to the point where we valued different things and our lifestyles were so different. We're still friends, but we just decided after 30 years, and then you just move on to something else.
Right.
Have a
I think one of the problems with the serious answer is that it opens the door for even more questioning about it. Whereas, like the ice cream response is a little bit like, I don't want to answer that question, but it's not making that person feel terrible, right? Like, it's not the same as saying that's inappropriate for a first date, right?
Yeah, which might.
It sort of it provides that lightness that says, I'm not going to answer this question, move on.
Yeah, I want it to be in a way that's not making the person feel badly for having
Right.
asked the question. Give just enough information that it might ease their fears, but move on to something else. Because what we're worried about is that this is a contentious divorce and they hate each other. And it's like, restraining orders and all this kind of stuff. And so if we can handle the issue in a light way, oh, our values changed over times. Our passions weren't in line. We're still friends, nobody's killing each other, but we're not married anymore. Tell me about, your,
Dog.
tell me about your dog. Yes. Okay, lighter question. Are you enjoying the tomato soup? And do you know how to cook that soup? Because if you really like it, maybe you can make it for me sometime. There's gotta be. I want you to find quick ways to spin and pivot. So cute. All right. So, did we get through all 7 tips?
Well, we missed one, and that is, although, this is all great and it was a real conversation. The one we missed is a really good connection building question leads to follow-up questions. So not only is it not it's not close-ended, but it's likely to go someplace else. So I actually, Julie, you have dogs, so I'm gonna do this with you. So Julie, I know you mentioned sometimes like your dog, you close the door so your dogs wouldn't come in. So is it a dog or several dogs?
Good question. It's a dog and a half
A
because,
dog and a half. Okay.
and that's one of the reasons we moved here is because our dog Toby is 4 and he's our 3rd golden retriever and his
The
best friend,
best.
they're so great. And his best friend in the world is our son Kevin's dog, Bowie, the Uber dog, who has 800 and almost 900,000 Instagram followers. Right. And so it's like a whole thing. This dog ended up being in the front of Kevin's car when he would do his Uber driving and his private driving with his clients, and everybody just loved it. And he's been a filmer forever, so he would film what's going on in the car, and then he started editing it in creative, playful ways, and just put it up on Instagram and YouTube. Well, it took off, Sarah. And this dog is paying my son Kevin's bills because of the sponsorships. And you have enough followers on YouTube and Instagram, they start paying you. And so, yeah, they're having a bromance, Toby and Bowie. They really are, and it's just really cute to watch. I can't even
Okay.
say the B word around Toby. I can't even say the B.
So let's focus on your dog. Um, and not, is it a he or a she?
Yeah, Toby's a he.
He, okay, and not his, as you said, romance.
Yeah.
So how did you decide to get a golden retriever?
Well, it's all because of this guy, Michael. Years back, when I didn't have offices yet, my company was in its infancy. It was about 2002, 2003. I met this beautiful man. I'm always picking up, stallions for the stable, right? Because I have this huge face. So I see this beautiful man wearing a suit, and he was just comfortable, and he was just kind of hanging out, watching. So I went right up to him, which is what I recommend you do if you see interesting people, and had a nice conversation. He ends up coming out to my house for an interview, and he almost canceled because he said, I just got a new puppy and I'm thinking maybe I should do this another time. And I said, well, why don't you bring the puppy? And it was a golden retriever. And I fell in love with Michael's golden retriever. And that's the reason why we've had three, and he knows it.
Okay, so how do you spoil your golden retriever?
Well, right here in my little drawer, right here, right, and I had to lock my door when I knew I was going to talk to you because otherwise he would come in and he would start getting all excited and his happy dance because he would want me to give him one of the treats that's in my drawer. Now, if I'm reaching in my drawer, what that's all about. My dog is right here.
So did you have pets growing up?
Yeah, our first dog was Enzo the German Shepherd, and he was huge and he was amazing and he was beautiful. My dad was into cars, Ferraris, so Enzo Ferrari was
Ah,
named after the Ferrari. And then we had a big black Newfoundland, and my sister has had like five Newfoundlands as a direct result.
so big dogs.
Big dogs, and my brother and my sister and I have all been dog people all along.
So are there any other animals that you would consider having as a pet?
Well, we did have the guinea pig, and we actually had a
Those are barely pets.
yeah. You want me to tell you the story about what happened with the rat, how we got a rat?
Oh, of course.
So Kevin, that we've been talking about, used to go down to Skate Lab in Simi Valley. He grew up skateboarding. And when he got old enough that I could just drop him off and then come back and pick him up later, he had time, in between the sessions, and he'd go with his friends to have lunch or whatever. Well, he ended up at a pet shop and he saw this rat and he decided he wanted the rat, and he developed a story about why he has a rat, right? And what he lied to me. And his story was that his friends wanted to take this rat and take him home and put it in the microwave. And Kevin thought that that was horrible and horribly cruel. So he got the rat so that he could take him home and give him a good home instead of what would happen with the other people. So he made up this whole story so that I wouldn't say, oh, take this rat back. This is
Got it. Got it.
he's
Um,
been part of our family for a while. Did you have any like weird animals in your house?
well, we were cat people. And when I was growing up, and let me think, did I ever have any weird animals? No, but I have, when you talk about Kevin and the rat in the pet store, whatever. So when my son was like in high school or whatever, and we were both kind of cranky, we would get in the car and we would go to the pet store, and they had a hamster that was on a hamster wheel. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but if they get the wheel going fast enough, here they are going like this, centrifugal force actually sends them flying outside, right? And we would go there and we'd probably watch it for, I don't know, 10 minutes, right? Because it's just hilarious to watch. Like, do they actually like being thrown off the wheel? Are they so stupid that they don't know that that's what's causing it? I mean, all of these kinds of things that really takes you out of yourself if you're in a bad mood. So I highly recommend it. Okay, but what I'm showing here, we're going to move beyond pets, is notice that the question I asked her about does she have a pet led to all these follow-up questions, which led to a conversation, right? It didn't, even if somebody had said no, even if Julia had said, no, I don't have a pet, I might have said, did you ever have a pet growing up? Let's say she said no. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So is there a reason why you didn't have a pet, right? This all goes, and it's funny, like when you ask that question, how do you spoil them? I mean, again, people light up. They tell you a story. I let them sleep in the bed with me. Whatever. Like it's a very positive, um, kind of energetic question that leads people to kind of let you in,
As
and
opposed to, what do you do when your dog misbehaves? How do you punish your dog? Well, that's not,
right. Well,
let's talk about how to
right.
get them
Yeah,
on
I've never
happy
thought
game.
about asking that. And let's say you had said, yes, I have a dog, I have a dachshund. And I'm like, how does the dachshund interact with other dogs? Like, they always seem so friendly to me. Are they friendly when they're out on a leash when you go for a walk? Right. So, this, not, first of all, I don't want everybody to go out and ask questions about people's dogs, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is that there are questions that you can envision that they're going to lead to follow-up questions. Um, and those are great relationship building questions because those avoid those awkward long silences, because that this question is there's lots of places, you don't know where it's going to take you, but once people start talking about their pets, these questions take you somewhere, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the podcast or if we talked about it in boot camp, but I have some clients who have developed a fun little way to make sure that first dates are never boring, never dull. And there's a blog article that I wrote not long ago, a million questions, a million different topics that you can talk about on dates. So what this one gentleman did was he printed them up, and he's got one of those paper cutters, and so he cut them all into individual questions, and he picked his favorites and he puts them in an envelope. It's just an envelope, but it's in his glove box. And then when he finds himself being a little nervous, that, oh my gosh, this woman is so beautiful, I'm a little nervous, what am I going to say? Whatever, he'll just grab a few of them and stick them in his pocket. And then if there's a lull in the conversation, he'll throw them on the table and say, okay, Sarah, your turn. Go pick a question, any question.
Fabulous.
It could be about pets. It could be about vacations. If you could redo a vacation or go back to a place you've been to in your life that you loved, where would it be?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you light up. Oh my God, it was Barcelona. Let me tell you why.
Right. And maybe they won't say, let me tell you why, in which case you could say, what was your favorite part about being there? Right. And did you have a problem with the language? And, I hear that there's so many tourists there. Did you have that? Did that interfere with your enjoyment of the trip? All of these kinds of things. So you want to get questions that kind of get bigger and can be bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And let me say, Jill, you must read my mind, because my final tip for people is, when you're going into a situation that you think may be stressful or difficult, whatever, always have a few questions in your back pocket that you use, that are there, because first of all, it's just going to take the temperature down on your anxiety, and secondly, like, when you have that moment when this seems like it's a really difficult conversation, you can pull them out and ask them. And so I'll share my favorite, or the one I use. It's not even my favorite, but I like to ask people, so tell me the story about the origin of your name. You can get amazing conversations based on that. Some of them are incredibly funny. One of them was, I asked somebody, tell me the story about the origin of your name. Tell me about the origin of your name. And she said, I was named after one of my father's ex-girlfriends. And I'm like, oh my God, that opens up a whole nother world.
How did your mother feel
So,
about that?
so again, you can get good at, you can get answer. That's one of my favorite, because it's kind of very low risk. You can, again, it can go lots of different places. Was that a family name? Did you ever want a different name? Would you ever consider giving a pet that name? I mean, you can just, it's a kind of question that is very low risk. Sometimes you don't get very good answers, but then you could shift into something else that has to do with names. Like, if you had a new pet, uh, have you thought about what you would name it? You know, what's important to you in the name of a pet?
Yeah, and I can see all of those conversations going in nice places. I think it's a good idea for everybody to have in their phone, like in the notes section, if you ever get bored or something, and I don't want people to have their phones out on the table, but if they are on the table, like men don't have purses, they should be upside down. But whenever there's a lull, there's a lady that I've worked with, and she'll open up her phone, she'll go to her notes section, and she's got a section there called um, Great Get to Know You Questions. And
Mhm.
so if you and I were on this date, I could say, okay, so Sarah, I have some interesting getting to know you questions.
Are you
Would you like
game?
to grab one? Are you game for a little fun adventure? And then if you say yes, I go to my questions and I pick one that I think would be appropriate for you. I think let's give our listeners a challenge, which is come up with 5 lovely questions that you can use on your first dates and put them in your phone, print them up, put it in your wallet so that you always have them. And then if you're noticing that the date's getting a little flat, or for sure this is not going to be your person because you found out she wants to make babies and you don't, whatever the reason is. He's moving to London and will be living there forever. And you can't live in London because of your job or whatever. So you're not going to just make it a dull, cut it short kind of a date. Make it fun and dive in. Okay, Sarah, so I have these fun questions. Are you game for an adventure?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, you got 5. That's your mission. If you're listening to this podcast, I want you to have 5 questions, open-ended questions that you feel comfortable asking on a first date, and store them somewhere in your phone or put them in your wallet and let me know that you did that. And if you really want to be bold, email me and tell me what those questions are, julie@julieferman.com, and we'll build more and more great questions to ask on first dates.
So, Julie, can I just add to that? There are, if you go on Amazon and you put conversation cards or something like that, you're going to come up with, there's lots of products out there, some better than others. And if you're stuck, great questions there. There's also a few books out there which are called, 100 Questions to Change Your Life or things like that. So there's lots of resources out there on this that can help you if you're somebody who's like, I'm just stumped, I don't get it. These either can be the questions that are in your back pocket, or they can lead to like, okay, now I get it. So I'm interested in cooking. Talking about cooking will bring my best person, my best self to this event. Then pick those, right? Those can be things that kind of trigger for you what might be your 5 questions.
I love it. I love our conversation, and I love that the future dates that are going to be happening are going to be a little more interesting and a little bit less transactional. And let's just get away from the question, is this my person? We don't know yet. Most people are not. So how about we contribute to this person, enrich their life, allow them to enrich our lives? How about that? If you only got an hour, what can I learn from an hour with Sarah? Let's go find out.
Or just how fun is it to have this conversation, right? Like all the things we've talked about, we laughed about, right? I mean, this was fun.
And if all of the dates out there can be at least this much fun, that would be the goal of this podcast. So no date is a bad date if you do these things, right? And maybe you go on a date with Sarah and she's not going for you, but you had a great time with her. So you can spin it into something else. She could be a great +1 to bring to your company Christmas party. She could be somebody who would be so much fun to invite to this big picnic that you're going to be planning because she's the one who makes the best chocolate chip cookies because she already told you.
By the way, I am not that person.
No, you don't
But
have
I promise to bring some good questions.
you have any kind of a signature recipe? Can you cook anything, Sarah? You cook reservations? You cook reservations. You carry out.
I make a good pumpkin bread.
There you go. Everybody needs to have something that they can prepare or make. And I don't care if you make it or not. I've got a great friend who's just awful in the kitchen, like she'll burn anything, but she's great at bringing things. And she'll bring a beautiful tray with a big chicken on it that she got at the grocery store, and she'll just make it look really pretty.
Oh.
And nobody needs to know that it didn't come right out of her oven. Nobody needs, right? Have something you can bring and something you can say. Sarah, you're just a delight. Thank you for
Oh,
doing
thank
this
you.
with us.
It was really fun. And look at all I learned about you that I would never have learned about you if I we hadn't had in all these connection building questions.
Exactly right. If people want to find you, if they want to explore with you, if they want to hire you to learn how to do, can you work one-on-one and how to become a better conversationalist?
It's I haven't moved this inquiry. This is kind of an exercise of love in terms of like I'm really fascinated with this, but I'll keep that in mind.
That's right. And gentlemen, if you find this woman fascinating and you want to have a date with her, you got to go through me. So just email me, julie@julieferman.com. And where you hang your hat most of the time is
San Francisco,
Northern
a city
California.
I love, and that could be a whole conversation.
Exactly. And there are other people who've done our boot camp classes who are in Northern California. And anytime I'm up there, we will gather
Oh, I
everyone.
look forward to that. That would be great.
We're going to be doing a theater event in a couple of weeks in LA. And so I always invite the boot camp people first because they're the people who've done all the work, right? They deserve every invitation. And then people we've done consultations with. So if you want, you got a wild hair, pop down from San Francisco to LA for our theater event. I'll save a ticket for you.
Thanks so much.
I'll talk to you soon, Sarah.
Thank you so much for it. This was really fun, which is what a good connection building question conversation should be.
Absolutely is. So, folks, take all this to heart and create your 5 questions and see what you can do to bring a higher degree of interaction to your conversations and to your communications in general. And you guys go out there and transform me to we for yourself. Thanks for listening.